on that basis. Go tell the Zulus they may not exist, they may not have a kingdom, they may not have land.
My understanding is that some community leaders from Orania visited the US seeking recognition as an autonomous entity through the help of President Donald Trump.
The question is with which categories you view it, and if you still cling to the old racist categories as the EFF is doing, you will not see what is before your eyes.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe that Orania should be discontinued?
We are here, we've been here for 30 years plus, we'll be here for many more decades to come.
Because Orania is a group of people opposed to majority black rule when apartheid ended some 3 decades ago.
But as a community, we do not know, we do not need or seek permission to exist. And it's not for the EFF or any other government to tell this community it may not exist.
With such a move, the EFF has accused you of destroying the unity of South Africa.
Guys, so this whole concept of Orania, Klein-Fontaine, I see Klein-Fontaine is actually shaking the media now, and I'll be making a video after this, so stay tuned about, you know, this whole debate about Klein-Fontaine, the whole issue about how Africans are accepting the idea of white-only settlements, all right? It's becoming really something that is actually, that we really should now slowly start tackling with wisdom. I actually spoke to some of my friends and colleagues. I might even rope in the likes of Sama Sambit and Chris Papas. I've been trying to get a hold of him, and if you guys can help me, I'll really appreciate. But we really need to start speaking about, you know, dispelling some stereotypes about what it means to be white and African at the same time, you know. So I think this is where many proponents of, I think, allegedly the EFF are really not able to reconcile what that, you know, the two terms, white and African. And you hear this from this Orania reps interview here with this journalist. I think the journalist had some really, they were really a little bit heated questions, you know, that actually confront what Oranians, the people who live in Orania, really consider as the basis of their existence, all right? And I know it's a really sensitive one if we consider what's really happening now in Burkina Faso with the likes of Ibrahim Traore. You have to watch the next video I'll be making on Klein-Fontaine, because, you know, Africans around the world, black Africans, all right? I'll be making, maybe I'll check around the videos to see if there's some whites in Africa or some white Africans who actually joined those parades. But there were lots of Africans protesting in front of US embassies in many countries, trying to actually ask the Americans to back off, all right? I think the guy in charge of the US command in Africa, I think the whole thing with the US military in Africa, he's a commander, I think, in the African department or something like that. I'll be doing the next video. The next video will be detailed on that. But, you know, many black Africans are actually having a message, a strong message to the US and, you know, probably Western powers, as it's actually described in one of the videos I'll be playing soon in the next video, that, you know, the West should back off, that Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso means a lot, and that with all the resources in Burkina Faso has not been able to build a single road, all right? And so right now, Ibrahim Traore is trying to fix things, and yet he's been you know, painted in a evil light by the West. This is actually the narrative in that video. Just stay tuned. I'll make that video after this. But now we see a different narrative in Orania. We see that Orania represents a settlement in South Africa. Remember the guy, the Northern Cape premier, I think that would have been the premier, actually arguing that Orania is actually a private farm. And I think this is the ANC's conception when they sold that land to the people of Orania, or maybe the Afrikaners who bought the land at the time. It's still conceptualized as a private farm and not yet a town or a city. And if it's going to be able to, you know, try to want to push to attain the recognition as a city, there are certain requirements that it has to go through, certain, you know, procedures, legal procedures and all of that, which Orania, according to the rep, hasn't gone through. So in other words, in the eyes of the ANC, Orania still remains a private farm, and it has the right to allow whoever it wants to, be in it or not. So this is the argument from the ANC, all right? But now in this interview here, we could hear really interesting and intense questions, regarding the right for Orania to have a self-sufficiency and all of that. We could hear the interviewer asking, questions about if Orania, because Orania, it was actually alleged, according to her, that the Oranians actually went to the US to try to push for self-determination, so to speak. And this Orania rep had a lot to say about that. It's really important to watch this video. She actually also speaks about how the EFF says that Orania has actually destroyed the unity in South Africa, and the whole thing with Orania and the likes of Fontaine, it's really building up a momentum, which I think is really important, because soon this thing is going to explode. I can already see the future of where the whole thing is going. I think yesterday there was kind of like a fracas in Fontaine. I think the EFF actually also marched on to Fontaine. I'll be making the video soon anyway. It's getting into that region where there might be associated violence, when it comes to discussions around this kind of only white settlement, all right? But I just want you guys, before we go into this interview, really hot interview between this Orania rep and this journalist, I wanted you guys to see the video I've been speaking about this Africa's biggest YouTuber, Wode Maya, who actually made a visit to Orania, the only white, according to how the video was framed, was actually framed to be, it was actually titled to be, it was actually titled to be South Africa's white-only town. All right. And so I told you guys the comments just blew up on this video. I'll be putting the link down in the show notes if you want to watch and read the comments from blacks outside of South Africa, blacks in the Caribbean, because he's a really popular YouTuber. I think I usually call him Africa's biggest YouTuber today. And so that video is really important. But this is the discussion and the pain point, I think, that really speaks to a lot of the issues the EFF is actually pushing against in terms of the existence of Orania, saying that they are keeping some of the historical artifacts that remind the blacks in South Africa about the historical pains that South Africa's history has actually gone through. And just watch the video. I'll be back.
To preserve our traditions, our faith, our language. These are the things that we want to preserve.
But someone might ask, if you want to preserve your culture, you're preserving your culture on a land that belongs to South Africans.
Well, that is another whole other debate. The land here we bought, we paid for it.
From who?
Well, at that stage we bought it from the previous owner, which was the government, right?
But I don't think an African can leave Africa, go to Europe and say that we just bought this land and no one is allowed to come in.
My family came here in 1683. Right, my family arrived here. That is longer than American government official visited Orania a while back. And when I told him that fact, he said, well, that's way longer than my white family has been in America. I said, you guys are here in Africa longer than my people was in America.
Yeah.
So our name is Afrikaners, our language is Afrikaans. Right, so we feel part of this continent, and maybe people don't agree, but I don't have another home. Obviously I know that I have European roots. 400 years ago. For 400 years my people have been here. I love Africa. I don't want to live any place else. I feel a part of this continent. My language grew, obviously from Dutch, but it grew on this continent. This is the place where I feel at home, and I've been overseas. This is the only place that I feel at home, is Africa. So there's a bit of symbolism here. So all of these busts have been either thrown away elsewhere, or they've been either donated or thrown away. And we put them in a half circle back here to represent these men are part of our history. No nation's history is only good, but also no nation's history is only bad. However, all of this is part of our history, and we put it in a semicircle with the symbolism. They cannot look over the edge of the hill. They are in the past, they're part of our history, but they're in the past.
With all the monument that I see in here, Would you agree with me if I say that this man performed a lot of atrocities in the past?
Well, I think obviously these are controversial figures, and I think the fact that we put them here in Orania with our own funding, some people are uncomfortable in the rest of South Africa to care for them, to see them in public, and I think that's why Orania is also a solution to a lot of the international conversation about monuments, because this is on private land, private funds, and it's our history.
But I know it's your history, but at the end of the day, a lot of people were harmed in the process. You don't think if you are embracing this, you're definitely embracing apartheid?
Is it okay to celebrate Shaka Zulu leader? Do you know who that is?
I know who Shaka Zulu is.
He killed a lot of people. Is it fine to celebrate him?
That's a question for South Africans.
That is a question. This is a question for Orania.
He was more like the architect for apartheid. Do you agree with that?
I agree with the fact that he implemented a lot of policies in the apartheid era. I think the apartheid legacy comes from the South Africa that the British created in 1910, the legal framework that they created at that stage, and the realities that follow after that. A lot of the South African black people fought on the British side and did not get recognition or the ability to vote after that. Yes, he continued with some policies, he created new ones, but the reality of South Africa in that context was already set there in 1910.
You don't think it's because of this that's why people have problems with Orania? Because of history like this, because so many South Africans are not happy with this history, even though it's part of them. But I believe, like you just said, let the past be past. I mean, we can never forget our history. But I mean, I feel like this being here, it's more like what do you call it? Like a sword in the eyes of the people of South Africa.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. We have had from the ANC Youth League, we have had influential South African politicians. We have had 2 state presidents of South Africa. Nelson Mandela landed with his helicopter just there. We have had traditional black communities, Xhosas, Zulus. We have had the people of the Barulong tribe. All of them have been there. I have seen in their eyes no offense. They have expressed no offense. They have embraced Orania as a model that they can learn from, and they understand that we have the right to put our history in a context for our people here, for a way that we can explain it to our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah, so these are kind of like some of the elements, I think, the sensitive parts of this whole narrative and argument about Orania that I think probably we need to now wisdom. I really hope that, like I said, I'll really be hoping that if you guys can, if anyone can help me get in touch with Chris Pappas, I really like to make a kind of like a podcast with him to really try to understand, especially from an outsider's perspective. This is me like a Nigerian now, really trying to get into the head of a white South African who has really grown in South Africa. I remember the last campaign, I was so impressed about how he learned I don't know if that is the isiZulu language or Xhosa. I don't know what language, but he speaks it so fluently. I was really, really, really impressed. And so I really want to speak to him and really understand, the understanding around what it means to be white and African at the same time. I know Neil De Beer broke it down for us in the last podcast, but if you can help me get to Chris Pappas, I'll really be grateful. I've sent kind of like an outreach to him, but if there's any kind of like connection to that, I'll really appreciate it. But anyway, let's quickly watch this interview between this Orania rep and this journalist. Really break down some really interesting points that I think it's really important for all of us to start considering and understanding, because Orania, Klein-Fontaine, I don't know if there are other kinds of cities in South Africa, but they will really be defining the future in Africa. Because while in Burkina Faso, people are arguing that Captain Ibrahim Traore is utilizing Burkina Faso's resources to build the country. And South Africa, for example, has actually been framed in the kind of like narrative of a broken system where many cities, are broken. We still yet see an Orania in South Africa that seems to be using the same resources, that is not building the other parts of South Africa to really build a civilization, so to speak, that is actually, you know, incubated with a lot of excellence to the point where it now feels as though, you know, it's a kind of like a different settlement within a country, and now the EFF wants to trample on that and allow it and probably, you know, cause it to disappear. Let's watch this interview between this Orania rep and this journalist and share your thoughts in the comments.
Let's expand the conversation. To talk more on this, we're joined now by the Deputy Chair of the Orania Representative Council, Dr. Boshoff. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. We understand, of course, that a meeting between the EFF, yourselves and the Freedom Fund Plus failed to reach consensus yesterday. Why do you think that's the case?
You know, Paul, one can differ on many levels. One level is that of misunderstanding. We had some misunderstandings and we have addressed some of those. Other may still be around. But you can also differ on perspective. You may be looking at the same thing from different angles and have a different perspective on the matters. But then even more serious is when you really differ in terms of your deep beliefs. And I think we have touched on a point where the beliefs between the different parties or role players are so different that there's no short way to really understand each other or to find each other. And that is why we came to the conclusion that much more discussion and interaction and engagement will be needed if these parties are to reach a constructive agreement on any of the matters concerned.
You talk about misunderstandings. Perhaps give us some insight. What kind of misunderstandings and how are you differing on perspective? And, of course, the differences in terms of beliefs. What are you saying?
Well, one of the points of misunderstanding may be that we are constantly confronted with racialist perspective on our existence and on South Africa as such. While that is not our perspective at all, we are confronted with the expectation that we break off from South Africa, that we are in some kind of isolation, a so-called state within a state, which is just not factually the case. In fact, we do interact with not only government organs, but also with many other communities who may share interests. We interact in many ways, but we do it on the footing of self-sufficiency and the pursuance of self-determination, which is part of what the present constitution affords us to do. We are not a political party. We do not march for our existence. We do not depend on the attention of media. We are a community of living people, of mothers and children and schools and roads and jobs and businesses and power generators. And, you know, this is home. We don't march and then go home.
If you'll allow me just to interrupt you there, Dr. Boshoff, you speak about that, you know, there's the perception around breaking off and being in isolation, that you're a state within a state, which is not factually correct. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, because my understanding is that some community leaders from Orania visited the US seeking recognition as an autonomous entity through the help of President Donald Trump. Is that factual? Did you meet with the president? Was that your aim? I mean, because it feels like a contradiction, saying it's not factually correct. Perhaps it could still be your aim.
The President of the United States of America referred to Afrikaners as a priority population in terms of his scheme of things. And we have an approach that says not about us without us. If people talk about Afrikaners, if they talk about our future or our position in the world, it's not to be done without us. We did not engage with the president as such. Our representatives have engaged with people that informs policy and explicate policy. And we do want more investment, more interest, more autonomy to call that, because there are many autonomous institutions within a country like South Africa.
Okay.
Provinces are relatively autonomous. Municipalities are relatively autonomous. There's nothing wrong with Orania being autonomous within a bigger setup.
It was just the word that you're not, it's factually incorrect to say that you are a state within a state, when my understanding is that you went to the US wanting to be, considered a state. So the big thing here is what the EFF has been raising, that the understanding is that you're a group of white Afrikaners who were opposed to majority black rule when apartheid ended some 3 decades ago, and that you carved out a separatist enclave, and that the EFF was talking about a new generation, a new perspective, and them feeling the importance of wanting to have these discussions. I believe that there were points of contact and a possibility to discuss. Do you feel you agreed on any of the points that were raised between yourselves and the political parties?
There are points of agreement. We did go into a matter of post-colonial statehood in Africa. The kind of centralist unitary state that have been ongoing in South Africa and in other countries in Africa is the result of European colonialism. And we say that's a kind of topics which we could really engage in and really see whether there is not a future for South Africa that are miles beyond the kind of questions which is raised at the moment. But as a community, we do not need or seek permission to exist. And it's not for the EFF or any other government to tell this community it may not exist or they don't like our existence. That's just not how it works. It doesn't work for any community in South Africa on that basis. Go tell the Zulus they may not exist, they may not have a kingdom, they may not have land. There's not such a thing. So that's not part of the discussion. The discussion of how we coexist, how we engage, what we discuss with each other, that is something that may take us forward if we really apply our minds to that.
Yeah, the difference is that telling the Zulus what you've just said, myself as a Xitsonga speaking woman, I am allowed to be in KZN. I am allowed to interact with the Zulus and be with them as a Xitsonga woman. With such a move, the EFF has accused you of destroying the unity of South Africa. And, do you think, perhaps let me give you a chance to respond to that, with the way that Orania is placed, the accusation of destroying the unity of South Africa, because Orania is a group of people opposed to majority black rule when apartheid ended some 3 decades ago. Would I be allowed in Orania?
Well, that's true. You will be allowed in Orania, and please come and visit us, as you may go anywhere in South Africa. We would be glad to have you here. And have you see what things are really happening. It's not true that we resisted majority rule in South Africa. In fact, we engaged with the whole process of transition in South Africa even before 91, even before the formal processes were taking place. We were engaging with the present EFF leadership even before the Northern Cape leadership were even involved. So really, there's no matter about involvement. There's no matter about our returning to some past which we have left behind us, and to which our existence and our ways of living are a true answer. The question is with which categories you view it, and if you still cling to the old racist categories as the EFF is doing, you will not see what is before your eyes.
What is the current scenario? I mean, if we talk racism on one end that you say the EFF is seeing, what would you like the world to know about Orania if you say that you're opposed to what the EFF is bringing to the fore?
Well, what we want to tell the world is we don't ask permission to exist. We do exist. We do interact with others. We are constructive. We believe in engagement and in talking through issues. We're not a flash in the pan like a march on a single day. We're not trying to get into some provincial government or whatever the political agendas may be behind the interactions that are taking place around us. We are here. We've been here for 30 years plus. We'll be here for many more decades to come. And we will participate on an equal footing with other groups, parties, communities, governments, institutions within South Africa. We will do so respectfully, with recognition and respect towards all others, the same kind of recognition.
Very quickly, I hate to interrupt you, just for the sake of time. How do you see your discussions with the EFF going forward? Are you going to reach some consensus?
It's possible to reach a consensus, but not without leaving the positions where the parties have been until now. Maybe consensus is a little bit too much. Maybe we should just say we need modus vivendi, a way to accept each other, a way to live with differences, and a way to respect the differences that are so much just a given part of South Africa, and of which we as Afrikaners and as Orania is also one.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe that Orania should be discontinued?
There's no question about that. If anybody thinks they can just come and discontinue Orania or take away its existence, there will be a pushback. There's no question about that.
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for speaking to us this evening. Let's